G'day and welcome to the JadeRat. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we are going to be trying out gouache paints for the first time. I think I've only used gouache once before and I'm pretty sure I wasn't doing it properly. It was used for a separate sort of craft project, so this is the first time I'm actually using gouache, and the one that I'm using has been gifted by a really good friend of mine, and she decided, hey, why don't you try out gouache for the first time? So here it is. It's the Art Studio gouache. It's a 12 set paint tubes. And the description on the back of the box says, create any color with these high quality, fully intermixable paints. With brilliant shades and excellent drying properties, the Art Studio gouache paints are perfect for painting on canvas, paper, wood, and other items, and are water resistant once dry. So, here we go. We've got black. And you can see here it's kind of creamy, looks a lot like watercolor paint tubes, that sort of texture of them. We've got burnt umber, burnt sienna, you can see it there, it's a little bit solid. I believe these are sort of more student grade paints. That one's kind of chunky. Prussian blue. And these are all 12 milliliter tubes. I really like this Prussian blue. It's a very nice, deep royal blue. We've got ultramarine blue. And you can see here there's a little bit of that bubbling where the medium, the carrier medium, I'm not sure what it is, gum arabic perhaps, I've got Viridian, but you can see it there, it sort of separates in the tube. There's that layer of medium sort of encapsulating the actual paint as opposed to being fully incorporated. You can see it here. This one's, I don't know, emerald green has completely separated. You can see that sort of orangish medium coming up, and we've got crimson red. Again, you can see that it's a runny outline. Vermilion was a bit interesting in that it actually leaked out mostly before going, and then yellow ochre. Well, there we go. Yellow ochre was a bit chunky as well. Lemon yellow. There we go. Another drip of that medium. It was a bit tacky, that medium. Once it dried on my hand, it was a bit tacky. But I'm not quite sure of what medium it is. And you can see it there, lots of mess. And finally, white. Now, some gouache sets that I've seen online, they have two whites. Again, the medium splitting again. This one only had the one. So I'm a bit hesitant to use a lot of white, but you'll see later on when we do our sort of test painting that I do use the white quite a bit. And it is the one that sort of gets worn down the quickest. The paints themselves are pretty creamy. I think they're a little bit thicker and drier, undiluted, than acrylic paints, standard acrylic paints, or what you would call poster paints. They do have a little bit of resistance in them, and you can see it there. It sort of scrapes onto the paper a lot. a lot firmer than perhaps acrylic paint does, and it really does get easier to work with once you add water to it. But I've noticed that adding water to it sort of is really, it's essentially just watercolors. I've got a side by side to save time. We've got a couple of them together, and once again, in it directly from the tube, pretty good. A little bit on the drier side. If you have a slightly runnier, ever so slightly diluted version, it tends to work quite well. A little bit like thicker watercolor, or having a really solid mix of watercolors. That's the sort of texture and consistency that we get here. I really like that crimson red color. Even the vermilion too. There's really bright reds, and for mixing, I've noticed that they're quite good. Although it should be noted that you'll notice that the yellow ochre doesn't quite blend very well. The green is good, although it is a convenience mix, so I haven't actually used as much of it as I thought I would. I definitely tend to use the Viridian a bit more to dull out the colours as opposed to the emerald green. So it seems that this set sort of has a sort of pairing of the primary colours. Maybe not so much with yellow. There is an earth tone, but it seems to be that there's a earth tone or a sort of muted tone, something that's easy to mix with. For the yellow, and then a bright yellow, and that's similarly, the red has a warm red and a cool red. We've got a warm green and a cool green, a warm blue and a cool blue, and then we've got a warm and a cool earth tone, and then black. The black's not too bad. It has a little bit of a cooler tendency, I think. It does tend to go towards bluish grey, a little bit more than brownish grey, but it's not as overpowering as it seems, especially in the swatches. It seems quite dark, but using it, and you can see it when it gets watered down, it's nowhere near as extreme. So now we're on to the test painting. This is the first time that I've really used gouache to do a standard painting, and I very much tackled it in the way that you would tackle watercolor painting. So you can see it here, there's a lot of loose sort of washy type strokes that are there, looking for places where there are warmer areas, cooler areas in that skin, and expecting it to sort of blend into each other, which didn't happen, and that may be a case as a result of the paper, but it's also interesting to see that it does dry out rather quickly, and that sort of dry brushing, scrubbing sort of motion was pretty prevalent, especially in the earlier parts. And then you can see it here, I'm starting to layer on thicker coats of paint that are less watery, and they've got a bit of body to them. The reference, or the inspiration for this piece is from the game Tekken. It is Sergei Dragunov, who is my favourite character in Tekken. That being said, I've only played 1 or 2 of the games. I've played 6, and I have previously, I think, played 3 on an arcade. Obviously wasn't very good because I can't remember it very well, and even now with fighting games I'm not great, but it's good fun if you have people to play with you. But yeah, I picked this because there's an interesting pose and there's a lot of variation in the skin tone that we can test out to see how the gouache sort of reacts. We've got, you know, that almost greyish area near the jaw and the neck area. There's this sort of purplish shadow that occurs near his eyes, and I had a hard time working with the eye area. You can see it here, getting that crease on the shadows to look normal. And of course a lot of pinks and oranges near the nose and the mouth area. Although I did like very much using the white. I think as someone who's used to watercolors and trying to avoid the white areas, preserving the white of the paper, there is a sort of sense of relief when you're using gouache where you can go over your mistakes or recolor something if it looks off, similar to how you would with acrylics or oils. And I really like that. There's this interesting sort of milky feel to it, and it's really cool. I like that about gouache. And granted, this is sort of not highly professional gouache. I suspect that the effect is a lot better, but it's still what was really good, and I got a good result out of it. I think at the end I was happy with the way that it turned out, even though I wasn't very keen on it originally. You know, the first few layers were really difficult. And again, that could be because of the paper. I haven't used it on really nice watercolor paper, or even something like acrylic paper or canvas, which they say you can use it on, but I don't know how it'll go. Another thing that is really interesting to note here is that it does reactivate quite well when dry. So I know that there's certain types of gouache, I believe it's acrylic gouache, that does behave like acrylic paints, especially when they're dry. These paints were much like dried up watercolors, tube watercolor paints, where they sort of sat on my palette and went all, you know, crunchy or clumped up. And then it does benefit from misting the palette perhaps a few minutes before you start painting, and you can get a very similar effect to what you had originally with the fresh. As it is quite warm here in Australia, it did dry pretty quickly, but I had good fun with adding the layers on. And that's about it. Hope everybody has a good one. Hopefully we're having a good new year, and I will see you next time. Bye.